This is episode 29 of Bando's Breakdowns. My name is Zain Bando. Happy first full week of November, everyone. Thank you again for taking some time out of your busy afternoon, and I'm sure, at least for some of you, your busy week, to tune in and listen or watch me do my weekly spiel where I give you my unfiltered takes, 30 to 45 minutes in the world of sports. You should know the drill by now. And thank you again for tuning in. This is a production of the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, and this show, along with every other show on the network, is presented by Playback as well. So if you can go and support them, that would be greatly appreciated. Just a few quick reminders, though, before we get underway. Please be sure to like and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated. You can go to youtube.com/ETB network to do so. We are slowly but surely approaching 1,000 subscribers, so it would be really, really, really helpful if you could go on. If you like what you hear today, or if you like what you see based on what version of this that you are watching, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell. That way you get notified of every single show that I do and every single show across the network. There was no episode of the MMA Outsiders, so for those of you who are looking for a recap of UFC Edmonton and a preview of UFC Vegas 100, you have come to the right place, as there is no additional talking points from those two cards previously to go off of. So if you are coming here just to hear about my thoughts in the world of MMA, you have come to the right place, at least for a portion of the show this week. So it'd be greatly appreciated if you could subscribe there. You can also listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, YouTube Premium, and so much more. Again, it's greatly appreciated if you do this over on the audio only side as well. That way, my show and every other show across the network shows up in your podcast feed in your recent activity or wherever it is found based on the app. So, again, if you have a morning commute, if you're in your car, if you're just sipping your coffee, if you're walking your dog, whatever you're doing that's leisurely, that won't allow you to sit in front of a computer screen to watch me, you can listen to me again wherever you get your podcast. I may have mentioned it just about 30 seconds or so ago, but wanted to give a quick reminder that this show is presented by Playback. Playback has been a wonderful sponsor to us ever since the back half of the last NBA season. We've already had a couple of successful NBA streams that we're calling whip around. So we take a window, 5 or 6 games, usually at about 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern on a random weeknight, and we go through and we watch all of them. I was not on the last one, but we just had one a couple of days ago where we watched 9 games across the entire association. So for those of you who like the NBA, be sure to tune in to more of those streams. It's based on the other sports that Playback decides to add in the coming months and in the coming years. All of your sports will be covered. For those of you who like the Olympics, we got to do the Summer Olympics with basketball as well. We get to watch Team USA, men's basketball specifically, so that was really fun. So if you want to join a different type of community, you can go to playback.tv/ETB network. And speaking of Playback, here we go. Presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for a Q&A. And of course, if you like, if you like being involved and you like, interacting with other types of fantasy sports and so much more, this is the place for you to come on and converse. So if you want to be a part of an interesting community without feeling like you're alone in the process of watching sports, you can do so. Playback.tv/ETB network. You can join the community, and it's very much appreciated. We have a very packed show today, though, so we're just going to get right to it. We're going to start with Zan's overview, and we have a lot in Zan's overview to unpack, as I alluded to. But we're going to start off the top of the show with the news that the Illini football team is now out of the AP Top 25. For those of you who know or don't know, have been following this show for a while, I went to the University of Illinois, and I also have covered the University of Illinois football and basketball programs for a variety of outlets over the last several years. So I'm very much in tune with what's going on with Brett Bielema's team. I was in attendance this past Saturday for Illinois' 25-17 home loss to the Minnesota Golden Gophers. It's the first time that Bielema has ever lost to the Golden Gophers. He was 10-0 all time going into this game. He's now 10-1 all time against Minnesota. Illinois did not play well in this game whatsoever. It was a super lackluster performance just on both sides of the ball. A lot of mental errors in this game. Just a game that wasn't very what do you call it? It wasn't very fundamentally sound, if you will. Illinois left a lot of chances on the table. Illinois settled for field goals instead of scoring touchdowns. And of course, it ultimately cost them. Minnesota had a couple nice drives, and Illinois got the ball back with a couple minutes and change to go. And unfortunately, there were a couple of calls that didn't go Illinois' way, including a missed late hit on Luke Altmaier, which would have put them probably first and goal at the 7-yard line. If they score a touchdown there, go for two. There's a chance that overtime is a relative possibility, which Illinois, was 2-0 in that category. So had Illinois, gotten the call and eventually scored, there's no doubt in my mind that Illinois would have won, but a loss that didn't happen. Luke Altmaier's strip sack fumble on a 3-man rush was bad news, and Minnesota walked out of Champaign with its biggest win of the year. They've now quietly won 4 games in a row, whereas now Illinois has dropped its last 2 to be out of the AP top 25. They were number 24 going into this game. It was a pretty big game considering how the Big Ten standings were shaping up going into this past weekend. And now Illinois, despite them likely being favored in its last 3 games, to finish with a 9-win season, it would be their first since 2007. Now there's question marks as to what is really going on in Champaign. So I'm going to try to dissect this in the best way that I possibly can to give you some further context as to this being a recurring pattern. So this isn't the first time that Illinois has had a brutal November under Bret Bielema. Bret Bielema was hired in 2021. So far, let me go through how he's done. So in 2021, they went 5-7, and you might say, "Oh, Zain, that's not great." But a few bright spots from that season: they beat 2 then top 25 ranked teams, Minnesota being one of them, and then of course a 9 overtime marathon in State College against Penn State, and it ended the year with a thrashing against Northwestern, who at the time was just in turmoil. It was then coach Pat Fitzgerald's second to last year without anybody even knowing what was really going on with the program at the time. So it was a building block type year for the Illini, and a decent season, but not a season that resulted in a bowl berth. Unfortunately, there were a couple of games in that 2021 season that Illinois did let slip through their fingers. They got off to a pretty rough start to begin the year, and I think that's what kind of made them dig themselves out of a hole, if you will, in that regard. Um, this included a couple of lackluster games during that year, to say the least. They lost a couple of games my senior year of undergrad specifically that they shouldn't have. One of them being to a Maryland team that, quite frankly, wasn't very good. They lost to a UTSA team whose offensive coordinator ended up being at Illinois. That's now Barry Lenny Jr. He's done a relatively decent job when he plays an up-tempo offense, and I'll get to that in just a little bit. And then there were just a couple of other games where you could just chalk it up as a loss. Another one, being, a road loss to Iowa where, Iowa was pretty good, but Illinois hung with them late. If you win that game, you get to 6-6 more than likely. So there were a couple of games his first year where you just went, okay, if a couple of, plays go the way of Illinois, they could do something. So in 2022, they reloaded. They went out and got Tommy DeVito from Syracuse. They were bringing back a ton of talent. They had Devin Witherspoon that year, Chase Brown that year, Sidney Brown, and just a lot of really, really nice pieces. And they went out and they did things that they hadn't done in a couple of decades. They beat, the likes of Wisconsin and Iowa and Minnesota, um, and uh, and Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, all for the first time in about three plus decades. So that was huge. They got up to a tremendous start. We're on the verge of a Big Ten championship berth, and then unfortunately November is where things fell apart. So to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, at the time that this is being recorded, if you go back 2 years, Illinois was in the driver's seat to win the Big Ten West, and they went out and they played a Michigan State team late in the year in Champaign, who at the time, had Mel Tucker as their coach, and they were coming off of a really good year, meaning Michigan State. They went to the Peach Bowl. They beat Pittsburgh, and that Pittsburgh team was pretty good. That was when Pittsburgh had Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett, obviously, he's now in the NFL. And Michigan State, was having a rough 2022 year. It was a down year. It was supposed to be a Michigan State team that was pretty good. They had gotten humiliated by Michigan, and they had a huge locker room incident. After the game, within the tunnel and the locker room, the week before the Illinois road game for Sparty. And that game, the expectation going in was that Illinois was going to trounce Michigan State, that it was not going to be a close game whatsoever, that this was going to be a cakewalk, and that Illinois was going to all but wrap up the Big Ten West and go to Indy. Well, sure enough, I was there. I got to cover that game, and actually, what I'm about to explain, I got to cover a bunch of these games in this collapse that were about to unfold here. But Illinois would eventually lose to Michigan State in Champaign that year, which would open the door for other teams to go about their business and go on and win the Big Ten West. Purdue happened to be one of them. Purdue went in the next week and beat Illinois, effectively ending all hope of them being ranked. And then unfortunately, Illinois went to Michigan, who again at the time was a very, very good team. They still had JJ McCarthy, and they still had a lot of other pieces, which eventually would lead to their national championship year this past season. But Illinois hung with Michigan for 4 quarters. They were up at one point during the game, nearly pulled off the upset, lost the game on an eventual game-winning field goal by Jake Moody, who also is now in the NFL as well. So, Illinois had a couple of tough breaks, and then eventually they would go on, win the Northwestern game, and what would be the final game between Illinois and Northwestern at Old Ryan Field. And then sure enough, they would play in the ReliaQuest Bowl, losing to Mississippi State at a bunch of NFL draft opt-outs, which I think partially was the reason why Illinois lost. So that was 2022. Obviously, you could chalk up last year, 2023, 5-7 year. Not the best of seasons, losing to your former defensive coordinator in West Lafayette, and not just losing, but getting humiliated 44-19, losing a game to a Nebraska team that just wasn't good. Nebraska needed one win to make a bowl game late in the year, and they couldn't do it, but one of its 5 wins was against Illinois in Champaign, so that was inexcusable. Losing to a Northwestern team that had just hired David Braun weeks before that, with a bowl berth on the line at home, inexcusable loss there. There were just so many games where it was like, how did Illinois lose this one? And if you have 3 plays go a different way, you could have been looking at back-to-back 8-win seasons, but that didn't happen. So then obviously they ended the year at 5-7. Looking at this year, obviously they were off to a hot start. It feels like 6-1 was a distant memory. They're now 6-3, and they're unranked. And again, November has not been kind to Illinois. And this is no disrespect to anyone involved in the program, but I think it's just kind of like a recurring cycle where it's how far Illinois wants to take this thing. And Brett Bielema has been very clear and adamant on that for weeks now. It's the 2024-2025 season. He didn't come here to get into a mid-tier bowl game. He came in here to get into January bowls, January New Year's bowls, which he's already done as coach in a short amount of time. But when you look at this team and you pull back the curtain, 6-3 to many other programs sounds good, but when your 3 losses are to what was the now number 1 team in the country and the number 6 team in the country, and then you lose to a Minnesota team that's, to me, mid-tier at best. very similar roster build to Illinois, that's a bit of a problem. So obviously, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that 9-3 is still on the table. I think 9-3 would be a great year. Would it erase the sting of the Minnesota loss? No, absolutely not. This Minnesota loss probably won't go away from Bielema's head, whether he admits it or not, for a very long time, because he knows he should have had that one. And I'm not trying to praise the refs, because I think the refs had their own doing in this, in making mistakes that led to Minnesota winning the game. But when you have the talent that you do on both sides of the ball, and when you have a Minnesota team whose offense, quite frankly, has struggled all year and has beat, to be fair, some mid-tier competition. No disrespect to them, but when you have the build that you do, and you're at home and it's Dad's weekend, and you got a near sellout again at Memorial Stadium, you're trying to get people to believe in the program. This is not the way you lose. So hopefully this is a humbling moment. Thankfully, the back half of Illinois' schedule is easier. As I just alluded to, the Michigan State game 2 years ago, they're playing Sparty again. That's a week from Saturday. It was recently announced by the Big Ten conference office that the senior day game would be at 2:30 Eastern on November 16th. Then they go to Rutgers in Piscataway, New Jersey, and then they end the season with arguably a must-win scenario for Northwestern at Wrigley Field in an in-state rivalry matchup for the Land of Lincoln Trophy. So 3 games to go. You have a chance to salvage your season after a bit of a speed bump, but still, man, it's frustrating to watch this team every year reach a plateau and then dip a little bit. Again, no issues with them losing to Oregon or Penn State, but to lose to Minnesota at home is brutal. This is not what he was hired all of those years ago to do, and he needs to get better at winning the games he's supposed to win. It's as simple as that. I would like to see more from this team. I want to see them get to a good bowl game, because I'm going to go to the bowl game no matter where the bowl game is, because that's how I feel about this program. I believe that you gotta support you got to support not just the teams you cover, but you got to support the teams you cover and you like through the good and turbulent times. And this is my way of doing that. So hopefully they can improve, but still, them being out of the AP top 25 and them not hearing their names called during the CFP ranking show yesterday was very, very telling. And I hope that I hope that people can realize that, this is simply a speed bump and they have to be the ones to fix it. So I don't want to dwell on this too much more, but there was an overarching story there, um, than just them literally being out of the AP top 25. It's the fact that this is a recurring cycle where they lose 2 to 3 games a year, maybe 4 even, where they just simply shouldn't lose, or they had a chance to salvage the game and they couldn't do it. This Minnesota loss was just another one of those scenarios. Um, let's keep it. Let's move on. We're gonna move over now to the UFC. We're gonna move into the UFC Edmonton recap. This card was okay, to say the least. It was an okay fight night card for who was on the card. The main event was good. Brandon Moreno looked great. Stifled Amir Albazi through 25 minutes. Busted up his eye really bad. Definitely is in the mix for a title shot against Pantoja. If he wants it, they fought 3 times before, twice in the UFC, once on the Ultimate Fighter. I would love to see the fight. I think they're 2 of the best flyweights in the world, but I think Brandon Royval will have something to say about that after beating Tatsuro Taira a couple weeks ago. So the flyweight division is in a logjam. So is the women's flyweight division. We had Erin Blanchfield beating Rose Namajunas across 5 rounds, winning 3 rounds to 2, which had a lot of controversy in that scorecard for obvious reasons. But I did think Blanchfield did do enough to win the fight. What else do we have? We had a bunch of Canadians on the card. Um, let's see, they actually did pretty well. They were just above 500 in terms of Canada versus the world. What else was there from this card? Oh yeah, David Shaw, UFC executive, filled in for Dana White at the post-fight press conference. Said something very interesting. that the Apex events will continue, but they will be less frequent. There's going to be more UFC Fight Night shows on the road, so that's very exciting as well. And not to mention the fact too that the UFC is also pushing for more international shows. So he discussed he discussed double not Dublin Ireland, but more events in the UK. Would like to continue to go to Canada, Edmonton being a hotbed for them, Ottawa being a place they could go. There's a couple. Toronto is important to them, so Canada is still a big market to them, whether you like it or you don't. So that's exciting as well. And again, I thought this Fight Night show was okay. There's only going to be, I think, two more road fight nights. So the one in Macau and the one in Tampa in December. So this Edmonton card is in the books. We can chop it up. I went 7-6, didn't do well in the main event. I incorrectly predicted that Albazi would win this fight, so I was wrong there. Overall, though, my UFC record is still stellar going into UFC Vegas 100. We'll get to my record and some more numbers in just a little bit. I wanted to make a quick correction. I said last week that 62% of fighters were coming off a loss going into UFC Edmonton. The number was actually 57%. So I just wanted to clear that up for any of you that were confused, that were maybe looking for the stat and realized that 62% was actually incorrect. So again, just wanted to clear that up. So thank you again for being understanding. For those of you who were trying to look for it and simply couldn't find it. But overall, I thought Edmonton was okay. We're going to move over to the Bears now. The Bears just looked putrid. Lost to the Cardinals 29-9 on Sunday in Glendale. And I mean, there's not much more you could say about this. I mean, Matt Eberflus is making a case to get fired midseason. It's simple as that. I mean, he looked disheveled out of halftime. Didn't really know what to say when he was getting interviewed. I think Evan Washburn of CBS was interviewing him right before the second half started. And for him to call, pass coverage on a run right before the half was inexcusable. And this team just looks dysfunctional as could be. I don't really know what's going on with the Bears. I'm disappointed. I mean, Cable Williams won. Let's see, he won, I think it was 4 out of his first 6 starts, and since then he struggled a little bit. This is a 500 football team now. They're 4-4. I mean, there's not much you can really say. It's the Bears being the Bears. I mean, it's just simply put, it's almost becoming like it's a waste of time to even watch this team because you don't know what team you're going to get. And to me, that's the most disappointing part about all of this is the fact that it just, from the looks of it, it just doesn't seem like they really care. And I think that's something that they need to really look themselves in the mirror and really think about. So I didn't like it. I didn't like the way Caleb Williams played. I didn't like the way the defense played either. Just a lack of fundamentals on all sides of the ball. Just really, really disappointing stuff. And to see that Eberflus has yet to win a road game on a true road game on a Sunday. I think the number is now 18 consecutive losses. I mean, I think that seals your argument right there that he's not the guy to lead this team into the future. And the biggest loser in this whole thing, to be quite honest with you too, is Caleb Williams, because now you just drafted a kid, number 1 overall. He had all this hype coming out of college, USC, the whole thing. Now they're going to give him a new coach, right, in year 2, and a new coordinator in year 2. So I don't remember who said it, but somebody else made a great point. I think it was somebody on Barstool. I can't remember, but someone made a great point. They're like, if you look back at the Bears' last 3 quarterbacks and you look at what they've had to endure, coaching change after year 1 was the common theme. It was either a head coaching change or a coordinator change every single time. And now this continues the cycle of just illusion and disappointment. And what are the Bears going to do to fix it? And it's clear to me that they're doing very, very little. And now they're even selling at the trade deadline. You had Khalil Herbert, who I thought had a lot of potential, and he's now on the Bengals. So I mean, if that just goes to show you where this current state of the organization is, it's in really bad shape. It's almost like, when you look at a tree house, right? And one of its sides is off kilter, the other two are healthy, and and uh and one of them is trying to stay as upright as possible. That's what it feels like to me. Is the Bears are a folding treehouse to where even if they win a couple more games, it's not going to mean anything because to me this doesn't even look like a playoff team right now. This team looks disheveled. This team looks out of sorts, and this quarterback, who's one of the youngest players in the NFL, has no idea what to do because he has guys around him and that can't produce. Number one, and an offensive line that can't keep the kid upright. And it's not Caleb Williams' fault. He is a natural talent. He's shown his ability to throw on the run. He's shown his ability to use his legs in key situations. He's, made key plays for his team when called upon, but he is not in the right offensive system. I'm not saying it's the Bears. I'm not saying it's whatever. I simply don't think that the coaches around him care about his overall development from what I've seen so far the last few weeks. Losing to the Colts is inexcusable. Losing to an Arizona team who's mid at best is inexcusable. Um, Losing a game to the Commanders, and don't get me wrong, the Commanders are a very good football team right now. They could very easily win the NFC East if Philadelphia slips up over the next few weeks, because you sure as hell know that Dallas isn't going to win the NFC East with the way that they've been playing the last few weeks. But still, you have the lead against the Commanders with under a minute to go, and your cornerback makes one of the dumbest mistakes I've ever seen. A volleyball up in the air for the Commanders receiver to catch it. Absolutely inexcusable. So the Bears need a lot of fixes. They have woes, and it starts this week against New England. I'm sorry, if you can't beat the Patriots, there's a serious issue because there's no way in hell you're beating Green Bay the next week. So I just want to make that clear. All right, now we're going to shift over just to switch gears really quick. We got a couple weeks till the Big Ten championships happens. I'm going to give you my way too early prediction as to who I think is going to end up in Indianapolis in about a month's time. So I think, given what's going on in college football, I think, unfortunately, as much as they're a great story and as much as they're shocking the world and as much as their schedule is, you know, a bit frowned upon, to say the least. I think it's going to be a rematch between the Buckeyes and Oregon Ducks. I'm going to explain why. I think Dylan Gabriel is one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. I think he's got a deadly receiving core, a lot of guys that, have NFL type talent and are very good. This team is an up tempo offense. They control the clock well, and they dominate teams when they're supposed to. And you got Ohio State that can win clutch games on the road. We're going to talk about Ohio State in just a couple of minutes, but this is the game. This game was huge when the teams met in Austin last month. This game is going to be even bigger in Indianapolis. These two teams could end up playing each other again in the playoff. There's no other bigger story right now in college football. And I understand people are going to be, oh, Sam, what about Indiana? Guys, you have to understand, Indiana hasn't played anybody yet. The Indiana team that's about to play somebody is this week. This is their first real big game this week against Michigan. If we're being quite honest, and their only ranked game the remainder of the year is against Ohio State. So if you want to go to the Big Ten championship, Indiana, it's right there. But even though you are undefeated, you have not shown me that you can hang against the best teams in the country. And there's the argument, oh, if they didn't have the logo they did, they'd be ranked top 4. Then they win it. Because simply put, in this league, you have to beat the best teams every single week. And I understand Indiana can't control the rotational Big Ten schedule, but to me, I think where they are in the rankings is completely justified. They shouldn't be higher than where they are. I think it's now number 8 in the country, and that's where they should be because simply put, they have yet to play anyone, and will they play someone like an Ohio State later this month or like a Michigan this weekend and win those kinds of games? To me, Indiana hasn't shown enough for me yet. Even though it's the best story in college football, There's no way Kurt Cinetti doesn't win Coach of the Year in college football. It would be a travesty if he didn't. He's done miracles work for the Indiana Hoosiers, a football program that has been non-existent for the last 40 to 50 years. And he's done more than turn it around. But this schedule to me, and I'm going to keep saying it until they beat somebody that's legit, this schedule to me for Indiana is an absolute joke. It's as simple as that. And they need to show me more come later this month if they want to prove that they're one of the best teams, not just in the Big Ten, but in college football periods. Well, um, that's my little rant that I didn't expect to fully go on. Really, really quick with this Bears Patriots pick. I'm going to be there this weekend. It's my first Bears regular season game in 6 years. I did not see any of the Justin Fields era in person, unfortunately. But I got to take the Bears here, man. This New England team, they're in a complete rebuild mode. They don't care how many games they win. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's just simply put, the Bears need to win this game. They could win it 3-0. They could win it 13-3. They could win it 20-10. It doesn't matter. The Bears need to win this game. The Bears need to win this game. They need to get to 5-4, and they need to show that they are still a competent bunch going into the final 8-9 weeks of the year. It's as simple as that. If you can't beat the Patriots, if you can't beat New England, one of the worst teams statistically in the NFL in almost every major category, a team that's had quarterback issues all year, a team that's got a brand new coach. If you can't beat the Patriots, I'm sorry, even though you have the number one overall pick and the face of your franchise, you don't deserve to go anywhere. Give me the Bears to win by whatever they want. I'm going to say final score here 24-14. Caleb Williams wins another start at home because he's Mr. Home King. They've done really well at home this year. I'm pretty sure going into this game against New England, they've yet to lose at home. So I think the Bears maintain home field advantage at Soldier Field, get a huge win, start 1-0 in the month of November, and focus on potentially upsetting a Packers team that played quite poorly at home last week against a Detroit team that will likely win the division, assuming that Minnesota doesn't have anything to say about it. So give me the Bears to win this game. I think this New England team is terrible, and this is a game that the Bears have to win. There's no excuses whatsoever. All right, now we're going to quickly move on to UFC Vegas 100. Last UFC Apex show of the year. Neil Magny, Carlos Paredes. It's a decent card. I like Magny to win by decision here. I think he's just better everywhere. He's got more experience. Um, he's got more longevity in the UFC. He's been around a long time, and I think he'll do enough to stop Brady's potent striking, and I think he'll win a decision easily. It's a decent card. It's not great, but Cody Garbrandt's on this card. DeRitter's on this card. He's making his UFC debut. There's a couple other guys on this card as well. The entire card is exclusive to ESPN Plus. I will be watching it. I will do my best to give a full recap of this one next week ahead of UFC 309, but don't miss it. If you're bored of all the college football, there is UFC this weekend again. Final UFC Apex show of 2024 before the building undergoes renovations. But give me Magny in the main event here. Gets my main event record back to 500. We're currently sitting at, I think, now 18-19. So, and win this one, I'll be back at 500. And we're still over 200 plus wins in the UFC for the year on predictions as we've hit the 450 plus fight marks. So we're getting very close to the end of the year. We only have a couple more shows left after Vegas 100. So it should be a decent card, but not the best fight night card in the world. But be sure to tune in to watch the main event because the main event I think will be halfway decent, and we will see how it goes. And just a quick note: college basketball is back. We've had a huge week in college basketball so far. My alma maters both won, Illinois and Northwestern. We also had some upsets take place over the course of the last few days. So college basketball is here. It's a marathon, not a sprint to March, and non-conference season is upon us. So if you like college basketball in any respect whatsoever, if you like a lot of crazy final score blowouts, be my guest and watch as much college basketball as you want. It'll be a more centralized topic on this show moving into, December and January when football is over. We're going to be talking a lot more about college basketball. You have to remember this podcast is still brand new. We started in April, so this will be the first college basketball season where I'll get to cover my thoughts on college basketball, what I think of it, what's going on in the sport, what I think is going on with the top teams, what I think is going on with Illinois' new look team with a bunch of Euros on this team as well. It's a very heavy freshman level team. The news about Ty Rodgers deciding to redshirt was a little bit disappointing within the last few days. But yes, college basketball is back. Don't miss it. Or more than likely be giving weekly reports on it. So stay tuned, not only on here, but on Bando's Blitz, because I might throw in a segment every so often covering the world of college basketball. So we're going to move on, though, now to Zain Zinger, just really quick to wrap up the show. Wanted to get into an incident that happened after the Ohio State-Penn State game. So if you guys didn't know, James Franklin, after the loss to Ohio State, it's another loss to Ohio State for James Franklin in a very disappointing fashion. Fans were screaming at him, fans were heckling him, and James Franklin decided to clap back at the guy and said, "Dude, what are you doing? What's your name? Like why are you doing that?" And I could understand both sides of this argument, okay? But when you're the coach at a major Division I university, let's be honest, most of the money, and this is no disrespect to any of the other sports, because some of the sports at Penn State are very, very good, right? Which just put it out there. But if we're going to be really honest, most of the money here is being allocated towards the football program. You were hired, James Franklin, to do one of three, I don't know, let's say, one of three things, let's just call it. Number one is beat the crap out of Ohio State every year. You've only been able to do that once. The second goal was to beat the crap out of Michigan once a year. You've struggled in an immense way, especially the last couple of years, losing to Sharon Moore and Jim Harbaugh in subsequent years. And number three is to win the national championship, which you have failed to do every single year. Okay? So I understand you have to defend your program. I totally get it. You're the head football coach. You're the one that makes millions and millions of dollars. I'm not even a Penn State fan. Okay, hey, I'm not even a Penn State fan. I have no association with the program. In fact, I only know one person in the whole world currently right now that physically goes to Penn State. That's in my media industry, if you want to call it. She's a photographer for several different places and shoots the football team. I don't want to mention her name on here just for privacy reasons and whatnot. But you are, let's be honest, you are the face of the entire university. You're probably a bigger name than the president, man. Let's be honest here. If I'm a Penn State fan, I don't know if I go after James Franklin in that regard, but I'm certainly pissed, man. You promise us every year that you're going to beat Ohio State. You never do. You promise us that you're going to try to go back to the national championship to restore the glory years of the 80s and 90s. You've yet to do it. And third, you're talking about this is a family culture and a family atmosphere, and we got to get better. Do you mean got to get better holistically, psychologically in the locker room, or you got to get better beating the teams you're supposed to beat, James Franklin? What are we talking about? Do people spend thousands of dollars a year to go to Beaver Stadium in the middle of nowhere to watch you lose? No. Was that until he realizes that he has some responsibility to blame and when he's to take, and when he says, "Oh, this all falls on me." Well, James, I'm just going to leave you with this. If it all falls on you, why is it that you're in the same position every single year? That's the question that I pose to you. And if you don't make the college football playoffs somehow, and if you slip up and you lose one more game, the only person in the whole world that you can blame is you. It's and was that my brand is over on that. We're just gonna quickly move on. We had some interesting nuggets in the world of sports involving two very prominent figures. Jason Kelce, who's now a podcast host and an analyst, and then of course we had Joel Embiid, who got into some hot water with a columnist in regards to some family matters. I mean, simply put, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. Number one, slurs are uncalled for. It's as simple as that. Shouldn't have Jason Kelce should not have thrown slurs at that kid whatsoever. But number two, if someone was clapping back at me like that, and I was so infuriated with the way I was being spoken to, would I smash the kid's phone? I mean, if it got that personal, the answer is probably yes. And Joel Embiid, look, I understand there's a line to be crossed when it comes to family matters. Probably shouldn't be bringing up deceased people, no matter who you are, whether you're a journalist, a person of authority. But to physically assault someone, to me is totally unjustified. You could have not spoken to the columnist. You could have not started a whole thing. You could have just gone out in the press and had your PR write a statement saying that I don't want to be interviewed by this columnist, and instead you went and you took the physical route, and now you got the NBA investigating you because of it. So I don't really know what to say about both of these things. I think it goes to show the heightened culture in sports at the moment. People are interested in other things outside of the game. People are interested in the viral moments on social media. People are interested in the bets that people win or lose. People are interested in all of these other things outside of the games themselves. And I think these are two incidents that show exactly that. So finally, we're going to move on. Video is surfacing on the internet from Barstool Tate of a fight between Georgia and Florida fans. And first off, Barstool Tate, I understand I understand what you did with this video. What you did was you were trying to engagement farm here. You wanted people to circulate your account, and you wanted people to see that video in plain view what was happening, which is one of the most absurd videos I've ever seen on the internet, to be quite honest. And one of the craziest videos I've seen the entire year, not just in sports, but in the world. Okay. And the one thing you did by doing this was you took away the context of what literally happened during the fight. You didn't mention how the fight even started. You didn't mention the people involved in the fight. You didn't mention that the cops were involved in the fight that were all also physically assaulting the people involved. You mentioned none of these things. All you wanted to do was post the fight for engagement farming. And to be quite honest with you, good on you because you probably gained a couple followers, but that was about it. And besides you tweeting it, I probably would have I probably would have never even known. So there you go. There's your couple. There's your couple minutes of fame. Now I'm going to start to calm down on a little bit as we get into Zain's look ahead to end the show here. We've got a couple of things to go over. We've got the NFL slate to remind you guys about going into this week. We're at the halfway point of the NFL season. Can you believe it, guys? Already, we've got the NFL trade deadline currently going on. We've got all this movement around the league. We got coaches getting fired. We got Luke Getzey getting fired. We got Dennis Allen getting fired. We got players moving everywhere. It's a total mess, but we're gonna play on in the NFL, and to me, that's the most exciting part of this whole ordeal. So getting into what the NFL schedule looks like for this week, there's some decent games on the NFL schedule, but let's go through the slate. We have a couple of minutes. Thursday night game, Bengals go to Baltimore. As I just alluded to, I'm going to the Bears game against the Patriots. We get the Giants and the Panthers playing in Germany, which is going to be a very ugly game. Denver and Kansas City, the Bills and the Colts, the Steelers going to Washington in a huge game in a conference crossover matchup. Minnesota and Jacksonville, Atlanta and the Saints, the Titans and the Chargers, the Jets and the Cardinals, the Eagles and the Cowboys, the Lions and the Texans, and the Dolphins against the Rams. And as quickly wanting to get into as well as the college football top 25 schedule, which I think is which I think is interesting, but it's also lackluster when you look at just the full slate. So this upcoming week, we got Iowa State going to Kansas. Purdue as a 37.5 point underdog goes to Columbus to take on number 3 Ohio State. And at the time that we're recording this is before the first college football playoff rankings come out. So if some of these rankings are outdated, don't blame me, blame the ranking show for that. Miami goes to Georgia Tech. Florida goes to number 5 Texas. Number 2 Georgia goes to number 16 Ole Miss. Michigan goes to number 8 Indiana. Number 18 Army goes to North Texas. Number 19 Clemson goes to Virginia Tech. Colorado looking to stay in the thick of the Big 12 title picture against Texas Tech, who pulled off a pretty wild upset last week. South Carolina goes to number 24 Vanderbilt. Maryland goes to number 1 Oregon. Mississippi State goes to number 7 Tennessee. Notre Dame tries to, knock on wood, avoid the upset as the number 10 team in the country, hosting 1-8 Florida State. Number 11 Alabama goes to number 14 LSU in the biggest game of the entire weekend. Washington goes to number 6 Penn State. Nevada goes to number 12 Boise State. Virginia goes to number 23 Pittsburgh. BYU, the number 9 team in the country, goes to Utah. And Utah State travels to number 20 Washington State. So that's going to do it over Bando's breakdowns. We didn't have any errors this week either, which I'm very, very proud of. So again, before we get out of here, be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Again, youtube.com/ETB Network. My name is Zain Bando. Thank you again for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And I hope you enjoy all of the football and all the other happenings in the world of sports. And until next week when we preview UFC 309 and so much more, I will see you all soon and have a wonderful week.